mean, you asked me what are the three words for me. I mean, it would be passion, expertise, and curiosity. 5 words for the gallery would be research, 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 research. I mean, this is what we're all about. We research in depth about artists, movements that have played a significant role in art history, but sometimes have been overlooked because they were not handled by the right estate or by the right gallery. And we make rediscoveries. And so one recent example of that is Wilfredo Lam, where we started in 2010 with an artist that was a very close friend of Picasso. He was born in Cuba. The father was a Chinese. The mother was an African slave. The Museum of Modern Art bought something in the 1940s, the famous jungle painting. And here you have this multicultural personality that ended up being collected mainly in Miami by ex-Cuban collectors. And when we took over the estate, we brought him out of that limited scope of perception and reintroduced him to the international and more global modern part of the art world, and organized an exhibition at the Tate retrospective, Centre Georges Pompidou retrospective. And today, Wilfredo Lam is a household name, and we also found out that he was a great inspiration for Jean-Michel Basquiat, so we published books about that. This is the role of the gallery. We focus on in-depth research, very much art historically based, and from that research comes basically our goal in exhibitions, publications. We don't do sales catalogs. We actually like to do something that contributes to the canon of art history. And if that's something we can do, like with, for example, the knowledge that Basquiat was inspired by Lam, then we have done a good job. I think when you look at the chronology of the gallery, you asked me there about some important dates. The gallery was founded in 1965, and it was founded by Antonina Gmurzynska, the mother of my current business partner. And she basically came from Poland, escaped Poland, and opened the gallery in Germany, with her background having been curator at one of the first museums of abstract art in the world, which happened to be in Poland. And so when she started her first shows in 1965, that was Russian avant-garde, constructivism, yes, abstraction, and so on. Not something that was much regarded at the time or looked at. And because she realized that, she started very early on to say, look, we need to do not only great shows, but we do need the leading experts in the field, and we need to be publishing books about it. So the gallery has since then published about 300 books. We have all our books in the main research libraries of major museums. So 1965, an important date when the gallery was founded. 1986 is when Antonina Gmurzynska dies, much too early, and Krystyna Gmurzynska, her daughter, takes over, which was a very important moment in the gallery's history, because it's always very difficult to make a transition from one generation to the other. The art world is very much a place where very often you just have one generation of a gallery and that's it. So the handing over to the second generation with Krystyna was a very important moment, and the gallery continued to strive. And then in 1991, I joined the gallery. I was before that in America, and I was one of the directors of the Pace Gallery in New York. And so in 1991, we not only became partners, but we also opened an amazing gallery in terms of architecture in Cologne at the time, which was done by a famous architect called Roger Diener. Mm-hmm. So very early on, art, architecture, fashion became part of the DNA of the gallery. And then in 2005, we basically moved completely to Switzerland, opened the gallery here on Paradeplatz. And so this is how the gallery evolved. And what's interesting about that and the dates is that the third generation, Krystyna's children, especially Isabel, are very much part of that gallery as well, and continue the strong growth of the gallery. So you have this very historically unique situation that over 3 generations a gallery develops. Memorable project, well, obviously Zaha Hadid collaboration. I mean, Karl Lagerfeld was a very important friend. We did many, many important projects. He designed many booths for us. But Zaha Hadid was the other great friend that the gallery had and that I was personally very close to. And she designed the space that you saw when you went to see the gallery. That's the second design that she did for us. But the first design that she did was based on Malevich. And Zaha Hadid actually did her dissertation on Kazimir Malevich. And so she was an extraordinary connoisseur on the Russian avant-garde, suprematism, which inspired her architecture very early. And so we did this project that she designed the gallery. She chose the Russian avant-garde works, the suprematist works for this show. We published an extraordinary book with Hatje Kantz about this. And it became a game changer in exhibition history for not only the gallery, but in general, because that kind of high caliber collaboration had only been done once before by the Guggenheim Museum when they asked Zaha Hadid to work on an exhibition on the Russian avant-garde as well. And so Zaha Hadid, that Malevich project led to her being involved in the Tate Gallery when they had the Malevich retrospective. That's basically, I think, answering your question about what's an impactful gallery. It's based on research and adding to art history. That's how I would define it. Well, look, I think for me, a game changer was literally Malevich, because when I met Donald Judd, who's a very famous sculptor in America, he told me once that the entire American minimalism would have existed without Kazimir Malevich, who did the Black Square in 1915. So it's one of those iconic paintings in world history. And it was the end of painting. It was the beginning of painting. It was a radical new approach to what painting could be about. And Judd loved the idea that the American arch enemy of the Soviet Union, or at that time before the Soviet Union under communist rule, was the inspiration for the new American art. Because all the American minimalists had looked at Malevich and had been inspired by it. So that kind of global impact from an artist who was behind the Iron Curtain, literally, and where there was little known except a few paintings that had made it to the West, to the MoMA and to the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, is an artist that had a huge impact after his death on an entire art movement in America. So for me, the Black Square and the 1917 disappearing of the form itself is a historic painting that changed art history, and one painting that Zaha Hadid talked about in her BBC interview with me for the Malevich show at the Tate. So Malevich and Black Square and the 1917 disappearing of a form is, for me, something that is a masterpiece of 20th century art. That's a super good question, and one that sort of touches upon the heart of what we do. You have to know that this was Zaha Hadid's last project before she died. So it was meant to be a temporary project, like the first one when we did with her the Malevich installation. However, I have not been able to take it out. Emotionally, I can't. So we are basically having Zaha's last project that was very important to her, very dear to her, completely authentic as an installation. And that we are preserving, and we're having people like yourself and others that come from around the world to simply see that, not even the show. So that creates a complication. And therefore, we have the second space, which is a neutral box. So what we do with Zaha and the installation on Paradeplatz is that I take it as a challenge for each show every time. So we have played with this architecture, and we have asked either artists or worked with the states to be challenged by the space in order to do this exhibition. And so, I mean, you haven't seen the rest of the building. We have the entire building here on Paradeplatz. So it's not just the ground floor exhibition. We have altogether 7 floors here. And so we have viewing rooms upstairs. We have research. We have one of the largest libraries in the world on art history of the 20th century. So we have all of that in the building. And so we can also show art in a different context upstairs and on Talstrasse. But that challenge to work with this last historic piece of Zaha has created some shows that otherwise would not have happened, because she forces me to do things and to hang things in a certain way that I wouldn't do otherwise. And so it's a personal challenge to me every time I hang a show, and it's an interesting challenge to the artist. I mean, she was in my day. I mean, I was for 10 years. I lived in America in the 1980s, and she was both a very famous photo model, as well as a muse, as well as a painter. And the reason why she does self-portraits is because if you are that conscious in the fashion world, as you know very well, and if you're a model, then you look in the mirror all the time. And so her look in the mirror is a critical one. She doesn't depict herself as the ravishing beauty. She actually has big eyes, and then sometimes she's without makeup or running makeup. So that's her approach to self-portrait, brutally honest. But there's a tradition for self-portrait. I mean, there was Cindy Sherman and others that did photography self-portraits. It never really went away. You have an absolute good point there. Today it has a revival. And the revival comes from obviously the digital element, absolutely, but also because exactly of the limitations of the digital aspect. Because when you do a digital photo, except you manipulate it and you do a PDF and whatever you do out of it, or worse, an NFT, then you do something that is more or less technical. But if you paint it, it is quite emotional. And that is a thing you can only do with painting, and you can partly do it with photography, but painting really does the emotional side more than anything else. And so this parallel between the technical and the emotional and the skill that she has with painting, that's the reason. As I said before, I always look for art that is absolutely unique and has done something that nobody else has done before. Nobody's done anything like Christo. You go back, there's maybe in the Renaissance, there are these wonderful monk sculptures with the hood over the face and completely wrapping the figure in the fabric. There are very early Renaissance paintings and sculptures that play with that idea that you don't see the physical appearance because it's veiled. But apart from that, nobody ever did anything like Christo. And what is on top of the work itself so amazing about Christo is the fact that it becomes a political element to get the permissions, to fight with resistance, to work on these projects for 30 years and then have them realized. So with Christo, you have an installation, you have an actual artwork, which is a collage, you have the process of doing it, and you have a public experience. You have it limited for 16 days. But you always said that, you know, if it would be longer than that, it would no longer be exciting. It would become something that's there and you can see it anytime. But if it's a short moment, it's like going to the theater. You have to go there. Why Christo? Why for us? Because I like to highlight art that is really unique. And Christo has always been kind of the people's artist, but slightly criticized by the art world because it's too in your face, and it's not something where, you know, you have a lonely painter in the studio who finishes a painting and then it goes out in the world. He was, I I think one person one could compare him to is like Joseph Beuys, who did these incredible installations, political hearings at Documenta and all of that, who also left traces of his performances. Christo was someone who very early on understood that being a refugee from behind the Iron Curtain and having arrived in Paris and having seen what freedom can do is a red thread through his work. And so he didn't want any limitations, he didn't want sponsors, but he wanted it to be public. And I think that is where he differs from everybody else. It's his personal pleasure to do it, but it's given to the public. You just defined it perfectly well, thank you. Christo always said, I need to feel it. When he stood on the ponds of the Lago di Seo project, it was wobbly, it was windy, it was wet. When you're at the L'Arc de Triomphe, you can touch the fabric, you go up there, you see the view of Paris, you feel it. And that sense of looking at the original and having to go there to look at the original is a very important part of Christo, but it's also a very important part of art. Well, I can tell you, I looked at the lockdown only as an opportunity, strangely enough. And I'll tell you why. One thing was it slowed us all down from a rat race that we all did. I think sometimes I was the hamster in the wheel, running, and we were rushing from art fair to art fair. So I rediscovered my gallery in Zurich. I mean, I was hardly ever here because I was always either in Hong Kong or I was in New York or I was in LA. And so that didn't happen. So I was in Zurich and I discovered that amazing people walk in the door. So that was one positive aspect. And the other is what it did in terms of how you approach your basic business, which is actually to show work selectively to the right people at the right time and take the time to explain it and to place it well. And if you do only that at art fairs, the time to do that is 10 minutes at the most. So at a gallery, you have an hour or two. And you see an exhibition. So what happened to many galleries and colleagues of mine is that we all revisited the idea of the art fairs. How many art fairs do you have to do? How good is it for the environment? How bad is it for the environment? And is that the right place to show art? And it was, you know, I'm probably the loudest advocate for art fairs. I was vice president of the FIAC. I got the Chevalier des Arts et Lettres for that. I was 12 years on the committee of the Art Basel. I've been always on all the art fair committees and I've always defended it. But during COVID, that changed. And I realized that it's become too much of a self-driven machine that is no longer under our control, but it has become something that controls us. And so if you take one step back and you do more longevity projects, like a certain pop-up for 3-4 weeks or a month or two, you come back to what the basics are of our business, which is a great show, a great catalog, a good conversation about it, a good placement. And art fairs have this tendency that this is compressed into a very short moment. Buy or sell, yes or no, with pre-sales happening, so that very often you come to an art fair and the work has already been sold beforehand. The great thing about an art fair is that international clientele comes together, exchanges and sees each other, and in a short amount of time has a survey. That was the good part about the art fairs, but they turned out to be too much of a pressure. So I think in the future, you will see less art fairs, and you will see more regional aspects. Even the last Art Basel was much more regional. It was without American collectors, it was without Asian collectors. That partly obviously has to do with the COVID travel restrictions, but it also reflects on a new reality that environmentally friendly and more locally driven, you will have fairs that are not as big in scope as they used to be, and they're not as must as they used to be. It will be a hybrid. There will be art fairs that have on-site and online, which is what's happening already. The auction houses have done the same. Galleries do it as well, but I think a gallery like us will never do it fully. I cannot see ourselves to become a seller of art on the internet. So what we have taken out and that's very much different from gallery to gallery. What we have taken out of this is that it is a perfect platform for information. So if you want to do research, if you are interested in a particular artist and you want to see more, if you want to see the biography, if you want to know the exhibitions, if you want, I do small little interviews now for every show, like 1 or 2 minutes, where I personally introduce something. So that kind of element is perfectly tailored for us, but not to actually sell important works over the internet, because again, you lose control. Someone who is much more into that world than I am explained to me what NFTs actually are in the art world right now, and I think that was a very good definition. NFT per se is not an art form. So you cannot take a picture of a picture. Let's say you painted a painting and you make a picture of it, you put it on the internet as an NFT. That's not what it's about. That was never the idea behind it. The idea behind NFTs is that people who already are in the cryptocurrency and speculatively in the cryptocurrency love to take that money that they made in cryptocurrency or other forms of that money and invest that in digital art. And that becomes speculative yet again. So you cannot take the speculative out of the NFT. It is by definition a speculation. And it is something that creates images that want to get the most attention and the most clicks and the most speculative interest. And that will appeal to someone who invests in junk bonds as well. You know, if you are a stockbroker and you only invest in the most speculative stocks they were called in the 80s junk bonds, then you know that appeals to you. Or it appeals to an audience, Z generation, that doesn't want physical possession. You don't want to own a car, a house, a boat, or whatever. But you like everything digital in your wallet, digital wallet, then an NFT is a wonderful thing for you. But if you are someone, and that's, you know, I compare this to, did television kill radio? Did television kill the cinema? No. So we're adding to it. You have paintings, sculpture, you have prints, and now you have digital art as well. And I think that is an addition, not a replacement. As I told you, we were founded in '65, so we are well over 50 years old. And we've always been asked by great scholars, when do we do the book about the history of the Galerie Gmurzynska? We are this kind of gallery, even though we deal with historic art, we always look for the next project. So we've never done the historic research, we've always done the next project because it's much more interesting. So the next generation with Isabel is already fully there. So the gallery will develop from Antonina Gmurzynska, Christina Gmurzynska to Isabel. And that is a fantastic thing for me to know that this gallery will continue and will constantly reinvent itself in what a modern gallery has to be in a contemporary context. And when it comes to younger artists, obviously that is, in my opinion, only something that one can do if you're of the same generation. It's very, very hard for, and there was a great gallerist who you know, he's from your region, Jean Cruget, who had a gallery in Geneva. He was a fantastic dealer of Picasso. And he had a few tries with contemporary art, and they were really bad. And so I learned from that, and I would never dare or pretend that I can judge contemporary living artists today as I can judge historic art. But I grew up in the 80s in New York, and so I was friends with Jean-Michel Basquiat. He was working in the basement when I was working with Nina Nozay. So that generation I can relate to 100%. And so this is Christina and my relations with artists, and the generation that follows with Isabel is a younger, more dynamic situation based in historic roots. And that's actually, I think, the unique element that we can provide for the next generation, is that the gallery has an incredible inventory of great material. And if you do these juxtapositions between the old and the new, everybody learns something. And that will be one element going forward. And the other element going forward is that we will also continue to work with the states that need our specific know-how. Not everybody is made to work with the states. It's a very different approach than if you show a living artist. And so that part we continue, and that's a very important part of our business as well. And then in the digital side, I think we will definitely work on more on the information part and having that digitally available, and also online viewings of shows and these little interviews that I do and stuff. So I think we are not close to that, but I know the limitations that it has for us.